for distance. On number 9, I'm finding the midpoint, so I'm finding the middle. If I count up 1, 2, 3, 4, so I will go rise 4 and I run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I don't want to go that full distance. If I go the full distance, it represents that line. I only want to find the middle, so I have to go half of it. Half of 4 is 2, half of 7 is 3.5. So let's check. Up 2 over 1, 2, 3 and a half. That is my midpoint. So to label it, I'll just write that it is at negative 0.5 up 1, 2. If you don't like writing decimals, you could write it as negative 1/2, comma 2 as well. Both would be correct. On this one, my slope is rise 1, 2, 3, 4, run 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I split that slope in half, I would go up 2 over 2. That would be my midpoint at negative 1, 0. My slope on this one goes, let's see, rise 2, left 1. So I'm going to go half of that and over a half. This point is going to be negative 1.5 and down 1, 2, 3 for my midpoint. Rise 1, 2, 3, 4 over 2, so I'm going to do half of that, up 2 over 1. My midpoint is at 1, 2, 3, negative 3, up 1, 2, 3. Find the midpoint of the line segment with given points. All right, this one gets a little bit harder, so I'm going to do the same thing where I count how far up my distance is. So negative 6 all the way to 8, I'm going to be adding 14. From 2 to 2, I'm adding 0. So this is the full distance between my 2 points. If I'm finding the midpoint, I only want half of that. I want half the distance. So if I take half the distance, it would be a positive 7 and a positive 0. So to find my midpoint, what I'm going to do is instead of going negative 6 plus 14 to get that other endpoint, I'm just going to add half of it. So negative 6 plus 7 is 1. 2 plus 0 is 2. And there's my midpoint. From 5 to 10, I'm adding 5. From 8 to 10, I'm adding 2. That's the full distance from the endpoints. I only want half the distance because I'm finding the middle. So half of 5 is 2.5. Half of 2 is 1, which means the midpoint would be 5 plus 2.5. And 8 plus 1 is 9. Four to 10, I'm adding 6. 10 to 4 means I'm subtracting because it's getting smaller. Now I want half the distance. Half of 6 is positive 3, half of negative 6 is negative 3, which means the midpoint is 4, 5, 6, 7. 10 minus 3 is 10, 9, 8, 7. -4 to -9, I am subtracting 5. -1 to +9, I'm adding 10 for the full distance. Now, I have to take half of it to find the midpoint, which means -2.5 and +5. -4 minus 2.5 is 4.5. -6.5 and -1 to -1 plus 5 is 4. When I get down to examples 17 through 20, we are given an endpoint, a midpoint, and we're trying to find the next endpoint. So we're going to find what the pattern is between our first 2 points, because if it's a midpoint, that means it's equal on the other side. So if I find what the pattern is from x to x, from -1 to 8, I'm going to be adding 9, which means if I follow that pattern again, 8 plus 9 will give me 17 for my x. For the y, if I have -3 going to -9, that distance is subtracting 6. If I do that again and find that other half, -9 minus 6 is -15, and there is your other endpoint. From 5 to 6, I'm adding 1. So if I do that again, plus 1, I would get a 7. 4 to 8, I'm adding 4. If I add a 4 again, 8 plus 4 would be 12. Zero to 10, we're adding 10. If I do that again, we would get a 20 for our endpoint. 4 to -4, we subtract 8. Subtract 8 again, and we get -12. -12. From 4 to 5, we are adding 3. Follow that same pattern to find our other endpoint. 1 plus 3 would become a 4. 5 to 5, we are adding nothing. So when I do it again, it's going to stay a 5. Oops, I made a mistake. 4 to 1 is going down. So I messed up on my positive. It should be a -3 because 4 minus 3 is 1. So 1 minus 3 again, there we go, is -2. That's better. To find 1/3 of the distance, we're going to do the same pattern we did with the midpoint. So I'm going to write my points in order. It says from endpoint 725 to the point -18, or -8, -17. I want to find the full distance. So 7 to -8, I am subtracting 15. And from 25 to 17, I am subtracting 42. But I only want 1/3 of the distance this time. 1/3 distance. That means both of these I'm going to multiply by 1/3, which gives me a -5, and a negative 14. Now, when I find my end, or my 1/3 the distance, that new point, I do 7 minus 5, which gives us 2, and then 25 minus 14, which is 11. This is our point. That is 1/3 distance from our starting point. (22), we have -5, -12 as our starting point, which means it goes to 7, 4. When I find the distance between -5 and 7, we have +12. -12 all the way to 4 means that we are adding 16. This is the full distance. I only want, this time, I only want 3/4. So I'm going to multiply both of these by 3/4 so that I only have that distance, which gives us a +9 and a +12. -5, so our starting point, plus 9 would give us a 4. -12 plus 12 would give us a 0. I have a starting point of 6, 8, and it's going to 15, 23. 6 to 15, I'm adding 9. 8 to 23, I'm adding 15. That is the full distance between the two given points. I'm going to find 2/3 this time. So when I multiply 9 by 2/3, I get a +6. 15 times 2/3, we get a +10. So our new point on this line that's 2/3 the distance away is 6 plus 6, which is 12. And then 8 plus 10 is 18.